Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 929. This was kind of a wild game, so I hope you guys enjoyed the live version. Anyway, I'm going to try and explain what was going on with the help of Stockfish. I started off with e4 here. My opponent went d5, the Scandinavian defense. I took, which is the main move, and he took with the queen, which is also the main move. I often play with knight f6 myself when I play the Scandinavian. That's the second choice here. But there's nothing wrong with queen takes d5. Playing knight c3, kicking the queen. And now here's the first kind of unusual move in the game. The queen normally goes to a5 with queen d6 being a second choice. But queen e5 check is a little bit out of the ordinary. It sort of invites an exchange of queens. You can see actually bishop e2 is the main response here, but I wasn't really sure about this line. It turns out it's okay for white. In fact, it's good for white. The chess engine likes white quite a bit here. The line goes c6, knight f3, kicking the queen, and queen back to c7, and then d4. And you can see I've got a lot of development here by kicking around his queen. So that looks good for white. What I wasn't sure about was that after bishop e2, you could also play this move queen to g5. Just looking at that g2 pawn, and I wasn't sure what to play in this position. If you play a move like d4, developing and kicking the queen can actually take that pawn, and it's a little bit awkward over here to defend everything. You're losing material. So, but of course that's a bad move, d4. The recommended move here by Stockfish was actually knight f3. Then if queen takes g2, you play rook g1, and everything is all of a sudden defended. The bishop defends the knight, which defends the rook, and the pawn, and the king defends this pawn. So the queen is under attack and has nowhere to go. It has to drop back to h3. And then you can play d4, and you're down a pawn, but you did get a bunch of developing moves. So by the rule of thumb that a gambit pawn is worth about 3 moves of development, this is you've more than hit that mark, and in fact the chess engine thinks white is doing really well here. So might be fun to try that out sometime. Anyway, let's get back to the game. In this position he went queen e5 check, and I just went queen e2, and then we're out of the opening book at this point. He could trade queens, and that would leave me with a slight edge, just a small edge in development, but he decided to keep the queens on. That's reasonable as well. I go d4, and we get some normal developing moves for a while. Knight f6, knight f3, knight to c6, and queen d1. So this move is probably a mistake. It leads to trouble anyway. Although this move the chess engine is suggesting, queen b5, that's not something I would have thought of. Well, the queen is safe there. It's protected by both the bishop and the knight, so you can certainly play that. It's sort of inviting an exchange, and after the exchange maybe you take back with a knight hitting the c7 pawn and threatening that fork. So I guess that's good for white, and if black decides not to exchange, he doesn't have to, but he can't really avoid the exchange. White could go ahead and proceed with the exchange and put the rook on the edge of the board and still get in either knight or bishop to b5. So I guess that's good for white, although you lose the queen. So I played queen d1, but that just seems to be a mistake. In the long run, that queen is a bit of a target on the open or half-open d-file. And we'll see that in a bit. Black plays these next few moves quite well. Bishop g4, pinning the knight. And I went bishop e2 immediately to unpin, but once again, not the best move. And making use of the b5 square is once again the chess engine suggestion. That leaves the e2 square free for the queen, so it can get away from this d-file if it needs to. But bishop e2 has sort of worsened the problem of the queen. The queen really can't run anywhere at this point. And now he just castles queenside, and he's got this this nice pin set up along on the d-pawn there. And he's got a lot of pressure on this pawn. He's threatening to trade off the knight and just take it. So I defend it with bishop e3. Seems like a natural enough move to me, but it actually loses, or should lose with best play. So what I need to do here is castle and just admit that I'm slightly worse. Although it seems like I can hold on to the pawn. If he tries to exploit the pin like this with e5, I can't push the pawn forward because it's covered. He's got knight, rook, and queen on that square, and I only have knight and queen. So I'm outnumbered on the d5 square. But I can play knight g5, try and force some action. So I'm threatening to take the bishop. He trades, and I'm also attacking here. So he plays rook to d7 to defend that. Oh, I played that too quick. I take back with the knight. That's a key point, to have the knight here to defend. Anyway, he plays rook d7, like I was saying, to defend the f7 pawn that was under attack. Then I could play c3, and for the moment at least, I'm holding on to the center. But he can inflict some damage here, maybe leave me with an isolated pawn. So it's a good position for black. Black is better there. But after bishop e3, black is just winning. And it's funny that he didn't play the winning move, because this also seems pretty natural to me. Even if you can't calculate all of the sequences that follow, just pawn to e5, taking advantage of that pinned pawn, just seems like the most natural move here. Once again, I can't push it. He's got 3 pieces on it, and I only have 2 pieces on the d5 square, so he can just take it and set up some kind of discovered attack on my queen. So my best move here is just to castle, try and unpin this knight and get out of trouble that way. And for a while it may seem like I can hold on to my material, but in fact there's no line by which I can hold everything. So he takes after that exchange, and he's forking 2 pieces here supported by the rook. So when he takes one, he's also going to be hitting my queen. I can throw in bishop takes knight, and then I can grab this pawn by eliminating that defender, but the bishop is still pinned, and he could play something like c5, or the chess engine suggestion, bishop c5, is apparently even stronger. Well, connects his rooks and develops a piece, and I still cannot save this bishop, so he's going to be a piece up. So right here the game would already be over if he had played e5 and followed up correctly, but that was not too hard. Instead he went e6. This game was played with a bit of a faster time control than usual, so maybe that accounts for some of these mistakes. But anyway, it led to some interesting tactics. So after e6, I castled here, and he went queen h5. And after this move, once again, he should have played e5. But after queen h5 and castling, after I castle, he plays queen h5, I'm actually better. So the evaluation has swung. You know, at the beginning I was better, then black was better. Now I am better again. So I play h3 to kick the bishop, which is okay. And he just takes that pawn. So a bold sacrifice. And after knight g5, which is the move I played, black is better again. So what would you play in this position? There's actually one move here which keeps the advantage to white. Okay, pause the video if you want some time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away now. First of all, if you had suggested pawn takes h3, pawn takes bishop, that's an interesting move, but it is not clear. It's maybe a slight edge to white, but it's tricky, and maybe if you run the engine long enough, it seems like black has pretty good chances in this position. So it's at best a slight edge to white. So that was not the answer. Notice that the defect of this move, you know, I move my knight and I'm hitting the queen, but he's able to defend with bishop to g4. So there's one knight move that prevents that. Well, there's 2, but this is the better of the 2. Knight to e5, and that eliminates this bishop g4 maneuver to defend the queen, because now I'm outnumbering him on the g4 square with the knight. So the queen is in trouble and needs to move. It can't, the attack on the queen can't be blocked. But there's also one of the reasons this is hard to spot is because there's also a pin here. So maybe he can move the queen and exploit that pin. This is something he might try, trying to get out of that situation. So I can take the queen, he can take my queen, and I can take his rook. So I won the exchange. I have 2 rooks and 3 pieces, and he has 1 rook and 4 pieces. But he has some compensation for the exchange. He's got a pawn, and he has active pieces. But there's another problem here, which is 2 of his active pieces are under attack. So he can't save them both, and so I'll be up a whole rook, and his extra pawn or 2 won't matter. I will just be winning. So that doesn't work. So after knight e5, the best move is in fact queen to f5, and here is the point. After bishop to d3, that queen is trapped. That queen has no moves. The knight is covering this square. Let's see, and my queen is covering that square. I wonder what happens. Anyway, yeah, it looks like he could go there for the moment, and the knight's covering those squares. So it looks like he might be able to buy some time by going here. But anyway, the queen ends up being lost no matter where it goes. And so, so the chess engine says the best move here is knight takes e5, just taking that knight. And then after I take the queen, his knight is safe because there's this pin again. So he can take my bishop and get his bishop out of trouble. And now I can unpin with my queen, and he can play knight c6. And so what is all of this? This is, he's got a pawn and 2 pieces for a queen. I have the queen, and he has an extra bishop and an extra rook, and he nabbed one of my pawns. And so white is better, but black is still playing here. So it's about 2 points better for white, I guess. So that is best play. So that's the best way to exploit this bishop sacrifice, not to take it back, but to go after the queen with the knight e5 move. Anyway, I went after the queen with knight g5, but it's not as good because he can just block with the bishop, which he did. And now black is better again because after these exchanges, he's just a pawn up. Plus he has this big threat on h2, and I have to do some struggling to get back into the game. I tried the bishop to f4, which was not best, but everything is losing for white at this point. And bishop f4 runs into the nice shot rook takes d4. This is actually a pretty good move. Well, maybe it wasn't that hard to see. It's defended by the rook, so it's hitting the queen. It's the next move that really is the kicker. So I played queen f3, and then he didn't play the best move here. If you want to, I think I'll just I'll tell you what the best move is. The best move is to sack that exchange here, and I have to take back because I've got to keep this square guarded. That's what the bishop was doing, and now the queen is doing it. But then he can develop his bishop to d6, and my queen is under fire, and when the queen moves, there's a mate here. So this is just game over at this point. So craziness. So that would have been the way to play it. He played bishop to d6 first. So developing a piece, putting more pressure on my bishop, but this gives me some time. It doesn't put me away immediately. It's still, can't really call it a blunder because it's still winning for black with good play, but it lets me live a little longer, I guess. And I can drop my knight back to h3 now and stop this checkmating idea for the moment. So he brings his other knight in, knight to e5. I go queen g3, that was hitting my queen. And he goes f5, defending his knight and maybe thinking of playing f4. But that natural move actually causes the evaluation to swing back. So the evaluation is in black's favor. Black is a pawn up, plus he's attacking. So it's about 2 points in favor of black at this point. And the best continuation is actually just to regroup. Drop the knight back to f6. Well, this makes room for the rook to come over. And let's see, I could try and protect with a move like f4. Notice that I can't play queen takes g7. This would actually lose immediately, and echoes of the other line I was showing with queen takes on g2. The rook goes here. This is even a piece sacrifice because I get the knight, but it's not really a sacrifice because there's a pin here with the rook on the g file. This queen can take by knight, and there's actually a forced mate here, which you might expect with the 2 rooks and the queen and even a knight ready to hop in. So yeah, it's just a full-scale attack, and it's a mate in 3. Anyway, so after queen to g3, just dropping the knight back is the best plan, and then I should play something like f4 and try and defend over here. But black is pressing and has a material advantage. Instead, f5 gives me some chances. And the best move for me here is not what I played, but is the move knight b5. It's hard to find moves like this when you are concerned about the immediate attack on your king, but a counterattack is often a strong idea. So I'm hitting the rook, and black doesn't want to sacrifice that, but he can drop it back and hit my knight. But then I can even swing my queen over with check. So that's the point of this maneuver. And if the rook tries to block, that fails to knight takes d6 check. That actually loses the rook. And with the knight here, he's not checkmating me. So this is all safe to play, and that wins material. But if he doesn't block with the rook, his only other choice is to move the king. It doesn't matter too much where he moves it to. The queen comes in with check, and then can start grabbing some material here over on the queen side. And now, well, without a knight here on f6, this threat to the rook is very real. It doesn't have an easy escape this time. So anyway, crazy complicated position. His rook is hanging, my knight is hanging, and so stuff is going on both sides of the board. But that is good for white. Anyway, I didn't play that. He played f5, and I had a chance to get the lead, but I played knight f4 instead, trying to defend. He dropped his queen back to h6, brought my other knight in. Oh no, I kept moving with the same knight. His queen is putting pressure on this knight. That queen h6 was a good move. So black is in the lead once again. I bring my knight back. He pushes on with f4. This is part of his plan here, I think. And I move my queen to h3. I mean, I'm basically limited in what I can do. I need to still defend against this mate. So he traded queens here. And after I took back, he resigned, because at this point the pawn is hitting the knight and the knight is hitting the rook, and the rook is undefended there, so it looks like I'm going to win a whole piece here. We'll come back to this point later, but he just decided to resign there. So a sudden turn of events. Instead of trading queens, he could just play rook to b4, keep the queen on, get the rook out of trouble. I guess it's looking at a target over here on the queen side, and maybe defending and plus staying on this rank. So this is still a good attack for black. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 versus 5. Yeah, he's 2 pawns up at this point. So you know, this is a +2 edge for black. He just needs to pause and regroup for a little bit rather than continuing to press forward all the time. But he has a winning edge here, and he should go on to win the game. Anyway, there was a further side note here. After the exchange, and I take back, he resigned. But there's actually a saving resource in this position. It's not winning for black anymore, but it's not losing either. So if you want to see what the idea is here, you can pause the video and see if you can find it. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. So the best move here is knight to f3 check. So you get this knight to where it defends the rook with tempo, because it's hitting the king. Now it looks like I can move the king forward and attack the knight, and there's still 2 pieces hanging. Actually 3, right? Those 2 knights are hanging and his rook. But he can solve 2 of those problems at once with this move. Takes the knight that was under attack, brings it back here where it's defending this knight. So the knights are both safe, and the only piece that's under attack is the rook, and the rook is now defended. Before it was undefended and he was going to lose the whole rook. Now it's defended, and he just loses the exchange. And so I take it, he takes back. That's best play. And now this is a position that's about even. It's a rook and 2 knights versus 2 rooks and 1 knight, but he has those 2 extra pawns, so he could certainly play on from this position. So that was the final side note, the final missed tactic. But after, let's see, right here, after he took my queen and I took back, he resigned at this point. Anyway, it was a fun game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you later.